Hey guys, Chris here again with Out of Left Field, and me and Graham are here to talk to you about baseball. And something tells me that something major happened this week in baseball. I'm not really sure what it is. Graham, can you fill us in on the major event in baseball this week?
Yes, I can. Charlie Sheen made an appearance at Progressive Field as the Wild Thing.
Awesome. And so did that have anything to do with some major championship play going on of some sort? Maybe the World Series?
I see W flags all over the place. Cubs have finally erased 108 years of sadness of being the GOAT, and I don't mean the greatest of all time. They were the greatest losers of all time, the lovable losers of baseball, and now they are finally world champions. And I will come out and say this right away. You and I talked. I thought it was done at Game 6. I didn't think they had a chance of coming back. I thought momentum had stalled. We saw way too many shutouts.
Wait. Now let's back it up a little bit, and let's be completely honest. You thought it was done after Game 4. When the Indians went up 3-1, you and I had a conversation. And at that time, I said that this series is going to go 7 games. And you said, there's no way this series goes 7 games.
Yeah.
So, if you please.
I thought there was a possibility it wouldn't get out of Wrigley. I didn't think it would go past 6. And I told you that if it went to 7 games, I would tell you that I had the wrong idea. I was wrong. You were right. So for the first time on the show, Chris, you are actually right. So I want to applaud you for that. I want to say congratulations that, we've had 108 years of curse broken in Chicago, and we've had about 7 months of curse broken on this show, really, while in the same broadcast. So congratulations to you. I'm very proud of you for sticking through it and persevering.
Yeah, if I wasn't always right, that would mean more to me. Thank you.
Okay.
So let's go ahead and put the ball in play, and let's start talking about the World Series. So since we didn't have a show really in the midst of the World Series, we did the show last week, just before the start of the World Series, as a preview show.
Yeah, it was the night of Game 1, and it was all right. Let's see what the hell is going to happen. I mean, there was such a large amount of drama coming into it, and I told you this, and I'm going to sound like like one of those guys who, he's playing the Monday morning quarterback. I almost changed my pick to the Indians in that show. We had already made our prediction, so I wasn't going to change it because I said this is what it's going to be. But to be fair, I had almost said I think the Indians are going to end up pulling this out. I think they had more going into it. I think they were playing better. The Cubs just seemed like they were a ton of weight on their shoulders, and they were trying to play too much big ball and not play enough small ball. And guys, you can always check us out on Facebook. We'll have all of our shows. We'll go back and forth with questions and such on our Facebook page, Out of Left Field, hosted by Chris and Graham on Facebook. Also follow us on Twitter at OOLeftField. And we will be having a very special guest joining us again to really help wrap up the rest of the regular season as everything, postseason, the whole year we've had come down to one of the most amazing nights in baseball history. Adnan Virk will be joining us on the show to discuss the entire year, Game 7 of the World Series. We'll be having some fun with him here at the tail end of the show. But yeah, Battle, in all fairness and honesty, I thought going into this that the Cubs were not going to end up World Series champions, and I'm glad that they did. But I definitely had reservations and concerns going into this series.
And I'll be honest with you, even as we were having that conversation last week, and in case everybody's wondering why we didn't do a show in the middle of the World Series, why we didn't do shows after, on off days, on travel days. We both kind of realized that if we got into doing a show on travel days or in between games, that we were going to bounce back and forth, and we really wanted to have a couple of days, let the series go, then have a couple of days to come back and look at it without making any knee-jerk predictions or reactions. But I will tell you that while we were having that conversation about whether or not that series was over after Game 4, and I said, no, it's going to go 7 games, I mean, part of me said, that sounds great, but there's not a whole lot of chance of it going 7 games. And even if it does, there's not a whole lot of chance of the Cubs winning that Game 7.
Right.
But you got to look at each season in context of its own season, or each series in context of its own season. And like I said on this show, and like I said to you, the World Series is a microcosm of the entire season. When you go 7 games, you're not going to have guys go into slumps for the full 7 games. And the Cubs have won 3 games in a row 20 times this season. That is an incredible number. That means that, that means that 60 of their 108 wins came in series sweeps.
Right.
3-game runs, which is an incredible feat. So I was pretty confident that Rizzo was going to heat up, that Russell was going to heat up, and I was actually really impressed with the play of guys like Dexter Fowler. I was really hoping that Jason Hayward was gonna get his bat hitting again.
Right. Which is kind of ironic how much we've talked about how he really disappointed in play, but then you hear how much every single one of the guys in that clubhouse said that he was instrumental during that rain delay in getting them to buckle down and get on the grind and manage to get through that extra inning and end up pulling out a victory in Game 7.
Right. And I will say this for Jason Hayward. No, he didn't hit during the postseason at all, and really during the season at all. But he didn't hit. His bat wasn't getting it done. But he was the better defensive choice. And I think that there are a couple of times that having him on defense helped the Cubs stay in this series. So while I hate that it had to come down to Jason Hayward in Game 4, whether or not they were going to go down 3-1 or they were going to pull even in that series.
Right.
And it came down to Jason Hayward's bat at the end of the game, and he did manage to get on base due to a throwing error or a fielding error. But that's the situation that you really don't want to be in. Is a guy who's hitting 0.87 in the World Series to be your only shot at not going down 3-1.
And let's look at what we were talking about coming into this World Series. We had talked about, the playoffs from the get-go. The Indians were decimated in their rotation. And then all of a sudden, they get absolutely phenomenal performances from, basically they run a 3-man rotation. So Kluber started 3 different times on short rest in Games 4 and 7. I still think he pitched well. You have a bit of a different idea in Game 7, and we'll get to that here in a second. But, you look at the differences here. We talked about how important John Lackey was to the Cubs this year. Now, he didn't have a great performance in Game 4. Clearly, he got robbed. He was, Marvin Hudson was not squeezing him. Marvin Hudson was locked in. The umpires in the series were locked in. The lowest percentage of ball strike calls was 90% accuracy, 90%. So on over 300 pitches, they're missing maybe 30. And that's a mixture of balls that are just on the borderline. You're seeing a glove move where maybe a target's high and the glove moves low and it still hits the zone. You're not going to get that call, and almost everyone knows you're not going to get that call. But you're looking at guys 94, 96, 92% accuracy. It was fantastic, and everyone wants to complain about this and that. Chris Guccione, who had first base in Game 1 and Game 7, his first World Series, locked in, lights out, making fantastic calls, didn't let the pressure overwhelm him, And the beauty of it is the whole game was decided by the play on the field. But we look at, like you said, the microcosm of seasons. You get a guy with John Lackey who allows Lester to have full rest. So you can run Hendricks, Arrieta, Lester, rested and ready to go, and a guy who runs his guys off of short rest and yet still brings it down to a decisive Game 7 that wasn't ready to go until 4 hours plus into the final frame.
Yeah, and talking about the umpire's performance in this World Series, it's something that really needs to be lauded because that umpiring team did a fantastic job. We were talking that that Game 1 of the World Series, the umpire behind the plate
Larry
had
Vanover
had a 97% accuracy rate. That is insane.
Yep.
That is insanely good. I think that there's not a single call that you could point to in this entire series that was wrong, that made an impact on the game. Everything that may have been called wrong was reviewable, and if it was wrong, it was overturned. I think they did a fantastic job with that, and it's something that you're not going to hear people talk about,
right?
How good the officiating was, but I think that it needs to be said.
And I agree. And I mean, it was just a great job all the way around by those guys. So a hats off to them and congratulations to the third team on the field. But I mean, so let's get into kind of Game 1. I know we don't want to go insanely long and break down every game. Everyone saw it, but
right.
I mean, Kluber announced himself with authority. Oh my gosh, man! I mean, comes in there, dot and strikes. At some point, I'm surprised Larry Vanover didn't change his called strike 3 mechanic as he was doing it over and over. He struck out, 8 of the first 9 batters, something like that, in the first 3 innings.
First 9 batters, yeah.
I mean, it was stupid.
His first 9 outs, 8 of them came on strikeouts.
Which, it's nuts, and also it's one of those things where it drives your pitch count up. But, I mean, he was fantastic. And the Cubs' bats were they were insanely cold and very hot and cold. They are, I believe, the second team in Major League history to get shut out 4 times in the postseason. The other team, I believe, was the 2007 Tigers, whom the Cubs beat. They have 3 world championships: 2007, 2008, and 2016. Okay.
And for you guys out there who are rolling your eyes at us, we do mean 1907 and 1908.
Which, on the bright side, if the Cubs can win another World Series before the year 21-23, they will be improving.
Yes, absolutely they will. Ouch. I'm a little bit upset because one of my favorite statistics is gone. Now I can no longer say that the last time the Cubs won a World Series, the Ottoman Empire existed. However, if it takes them another 108 years and things in the Middle East don't progress further than they are, people might be able to say something like, hey, the last time the Cubs won a World Series, Turkey was still a country, because that might not be true soon.
And to be fair, guys, as we'll get back to baseball here in just a minute, but I have to blast on Chris since he wanted to make sure I said I was wrong. Chris wanted to do a show the day of Game 6 just because the day of Game 6 was the day the Ottoman Empire fell back in 1920 whatever. So I want you all to, if you want to write me, ooleftfield@gmail.com, tweet me at ooleftfield, or send us a message Out of Left Field, hosted by Chris and Graham on Facebook. You can thank me for sparing you the show based on the fact that an empire fell and Chris wanted to have a history lesson for everybody on a current events baseball show. So, Chris, glad I could help you out there.
Thanks. But so quickly going through Game 1, Kluber threw a lights-out game, and of course, Andrew Miller came in, and he was lights out. Andrew Miller was lights out through the whole season. Shaw was lights out. I mean, there are 3 guys sitting in the bullpen for the Indians who are just amazing pitchers.
And the stupid thing to think is that Andrew Miller isn't the closer. How many times have we seen the closer is your big boy? We've seen Wade Davis, Chapman, which we talked about, and we're not going to beat the dead horse about how he can improve. But basically, Miller is kind of your setup guy who was just, he was a workhorse, but holy crap, man. It was one of the best relief outings in a series that we've seen in years.
Yeah, absolutely. He did a fantastic, just a phenomenal job. So then the Cubs get shut out in Game 1, one of 2 shutouts that they suffered through this World Series. And you kind of step back from that because that shutout happened, in Cleveland. So you kind of step back from that and say, okay, well, the Indians were excited. They were ready to be in a World Series. They were ready to play that World Series at home. And Kluber came out and he dominated. So how do we get back from this? And we go into Game 2, and it's almost like at first you start thinking, well, maybe the tables have turned a little bit,
right?
Because then the Indians are starting to have trouble getting on the board. The Indians are starting to have trouble manufacturing runs. They do end up manufacturing some runs, but they dropped that game, right?
And let's be fair, Jake Arrieta took a no-hitter into the 6th inning in the World Series.
Right, absolutely. And Jake Arrieta came out and said, look, I'm here to pitch, and I'm here to pitch well, and he did. And,
undeniably.
He wanted to make a statement along the lines of the statement that Corey Kluber made in Game 1. And I think he managed that.
And before we move on, but from Games 1 and 2, let's go ahead and address the chin hair in the room. And Kyle Schwarber, what a gutsy call by Joe Madden to activate a kid who, basically played in 2 games. Game 1 and 2,
3.
Blows out his knee, and then comes like, all right, hey, we're going to put your back line up and see what happens. And my God, man, he came through. It was huge for them, and that's why they had Schwarber batting second in Game 7, is they didn't want them to be able to go around him. And you look at that as, okay, well, maybe Zobrist is now batting 5th, so they can pitch around Zobrist. Zobrist had probably the most consistent bat throughout the World Series, obviously judging by the MVP trophy sitting on his mantle now. But, what a call by Joe Madden.
In the World Series. And, look, you and I have had the conversation about Manager of the Year. We had a show about Manager of the Year. You and I both think that Joe Madden and Tito Francona are the top choices for Manager of the Year. We thought that before they both ended up in the World Series. We think that now after this World Series, that there's no denying that those are the Managers of the Year this year, which is rare. We don't always say, hey, the 2 managers in the World Series were the best managers this year, because that's not always the case.
Exactly.
A lot of times we say, hey, those teams are in the World Series because their players put everything that they had into it.
And let's look at this. Terry Francona is 8-1 coming into the World Series, right? They're 7-1. 3 games in the NLD or the ALDS, and then 4 games they have to win in the American League Championship Series. But he also was undefeated in the World Series. So coming into Game 2, he's 9-0. They swept the Cardinals in 2004 to break the Red Sox curse. They came back in 2007. I actually just got into Red Sox Arsenal, Alabama, and was watching the games there. They swept the Rockies in 2007, and then they come here. So, and Joe Madden has been a World Series manager when they lost to Philadelphia back in 2008, I believe, the Rays. Mm-hmm. So you have guys here who they've been there, but definitely completely polar opposites in success. So we go to Game 3, first game at Wrigley. Bill Murray sings "Take Me Out of the Ball Game" like Daffy Duck.
Yeah,
I don't know. And we get Kyle Hendricks and Josh Tomlin, and we have heard Hendricks' name mentioned a ton for Cy Young. We discussed that. I know I picked Scherz, you picked Mad Bum. I get that the votes have already been cast, but Lester, proved that he was one of the best pitchers this year. Yeah. Granted, everything's already been cast, but he was absolutely out of his gourd. Pitched fantastic. I get he wasn't the best in Game 7, but he's not used to a role like that in Game 7, coming in. And then of all guys, Coco Crisp singles home 1 run in the 7th. That's all it took. 8 hits for the Indians, 5 for the Cubbies. There's a 1-0 ball game. But again, it was crazy.
I think that Game 3 was exactly the World Series we all expected. That was the game that showed us what we expected to see this World Series was close games, 1- and 2-run games, and we ended up getting
1 and 2 runs, but I expected it to be like 5-2 or 5-3, not 1-0. And the Cubs not being able to manufacture runs.
But we ended up getting these blowouts and shutouts that I don't think either of us would have predicted going into this World Series, especially not when it's 6-0 Indians or 5-0 Indians. None of us, no one can going into this World Series can honestly say that they thought that the Cubs would not only get shut out 2 games in a row or 2 games, but that they would get blown out in one of those 2.
Yeah, but I think it also, to me, this whole series shows, to me, that this goes down as an historically epic game that will be remembered for decades. I think my kids are going to ask me where I was. I mean, it took the best parts of baseball and wrapped it up into one game to end the series, but it also, to me, shows that, in my mind, it's the 2 best teams in baseball this year finally met in the World Series, regardless of where they were seeded coming into the postseason. But you're seeing teams that are playing 2 different brands of baseball. Yeah, they're all trying to score runs, but if you can get a small lead, we can work with a small lead. If you get us a bigger lead, even better. Now, a bigger lead did kind of show Joe Maddon's hand and maybe his faith in his bullpen, which we'll get to here in just a second. But it's you come into Game 4, you had Greg Maddux, Fergie Jenkins throwing out the first pitch. Obviously, Maddux, both I believe from the Hall of Fame. I know Maddux, going in and didn't take a cap, actually. Went in as a blank cap. Normally, the Hall of Fame plaques are, have a choice of team on the cap. But, right away, and this actually was the only game in the World Series where the team who scored first didn't win. We saw the Cubbies score first. That to me was huge, right? That they score, they finally get a run. That's what they need to do. Get some momentum, and then all of a sudden, John Lackey starts getting hit hard. He's not getting the close calls that he feels that he's earned, and there were some errors. Chris Bryant committed a couple errors too.
I think that the most important thing that happened was to get that run on on Kluber. Because they hadn't been able to touch him. They hadn't been able to touch any of his stuff. And, Ivan Drago has to bleed before you believe that you can beat him. And he did in that. I think they scored. They struck first in the 2nd or 3rd inning in that game.
They had a run in the flow. And to be fair, as you mentioned, that actually Game 4, looking back, granted it was a pretty big loss. But if you're taking the mentality that they feel that they can make them bleed, then you get a run off Kluber, and Fowler hits a solo shot off of Miller in the 8th. So you're taking 2 of the primary guys on that, on the pitching staff and the bullpen, who really are going to be the ones that are probably going to put the daggers in you, and you can at least prove it. Okay, guys, we can get to them if we can just stop committing the dumb mental mistakes.
Right. So
we roll back around. We get Lester in 5. Chapman starts throwing, 2 2/3 innings, which,
ridiculous.
Yeah, this is where I think Joe Maddon began to maybe overmanage a bit. And granted, they won, but still maybe overmanage a bit and really showed that he didn't have a lot of faith in his pen.
And it almost cost him.
Big time.
In games. In all 3 of those games, it almost cost him. Because one thing that Aroldis Chapman can't do very well is get out of trouble. But he manages to get into trouble quite well.
Right.
And I think that one of the problems that we have both expressed that we have with Aroldis Chapman is the fact that he's a one-trick pony. He does one thing really well, and that's throw the ball hard. Now, he doesn't do it with a whole lot of command. He doesn't do it with a whole lot of grace, but he throws it really hard. However, if you let Aroldis Chapman work 2 2/3 in Game 5, 2 1/3 in Game 6, and then try to send him out for 4 outs in Game 7, here's where you start running into trouble, because in that situation where you've allowed him to work those 2 innings in each game, now the entire lineup has seen him more than once.
Right.
In just those 3 games. And we've said it all season, you can time a jet.
Yep.
And so by the time you get to Game 7,
famous quotes, yep.
By the time you get to Game 7, it's a situation where he's starting to not be able to throw heat to people because people are hitting the heat. And then you see him throw, 7 sliders in a row, which I will say this.
We got in his last inning of work in Game 7. Oh yeah, his slider was sick, and we got into the last couple innings of games, or the last inning of work in Game 7. I mean, we were seeing things under 90 miles per hour. Now, granted, they were kind of up in the zone and out quite a bit, but I mean, I saw probably 6 or 7 different pitches that I can remember that were under 90, and a couple that were 97, 98. I mean, you go out and you trade Dan Vogelbach, who is supposed to be a great minor league first baseman, who you don't need because you have Anthony Rizzo, for Mike Montgomery from the Seattle Mariners, and you barely use him. Yet he comes in Game 7 and pitched pretty well. They had some young guys in that bullpen, but to just go to Chapman, that's great that you want to bring him in there to try and shut things down. But when you've got a 5-run lead, do you really not trust that your pen can hold a 5-run lead? I get having Chapman up, but have 2 guys.
Let's not forget how well Montgomery pitched against the Dodgers, how well Montgomery pitched against the Giants. I mean, Montgomery was a workhorse for Joe Madden in those first 2 series, and it's a little surprising to me that he didn't go to him in those long hold situations.
Right.
It's short relief in the 7th inning, but for a hold, it's a pretty long outing.
Right.
For a close, it's a ridiculous outing.
Yeah.
I mean, anytime you have, what was the statistic that Joe Buck kept using? That Aroldis Chapman threw 106 pitches in Games 5 and 6. Aroldis Chapman might not have thrown 106 pitches in the last 30 games of the season.
Right.
I mean, you're talking about a guy who comes out and throws 6 or 7 pitches and leaves.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he goes 2 2/3 in Game 5, comes in, ends up closing out pitching in Game 6, where I said it really wasn't necessary, and then has to come in, ends up being the winning pitcher because he allowed Game 7 to get tied. And I mean, so let's get into I mean, just the most amazing game, that we had.
Let's talk about Game 7.
Yeah, and clearly, it was going to be. I mean, we knew coming into it that, it was going to be no holds barred. Let's see what happens. And to me, Joe Madden really overmanaged this. Kyle Hendricks was pitching very, very well. Okay, Cubbies are up early. They get a leadoff homer by Dexter Fowler in the first. So again, you're proving that Kluber can get hit. Kluber's on short rest again. His 3rd outing, in the World Series. I mean, even your boy Madison Bumgarner didn't. It was short rest, but he came in relief. He didn't start. So Kluber coming in, short rest. They get thrown back in the 3rd. Okay, Kipnis was probably going to be either Kipnis or Kluber were going to be the MVPs if the Indians had won. Kipnis' bat was fantastic. He was leading from the front. He was loud. He was there. Lindor looked mature well beyond his years to me. Mike Napoli was good to have a veteran there. And, I mean, so we're back. It's back and forth. For a while it's 3-1, and then we go to the fifth. Now it's 5-1. Dodgers now 5-3. So, right. So Cubs. I'm sorry. So coming all the way into the eighth inning, right? We've got
and here's where
it's 6-3. But Lester comes in the middle of this, and everything
goes
right.
So
we get the wild pitch.
Let's talk about this. Let's talk about this eighth inning, right? Because I think that you and I both were in agreement when Madden went to Lester that was a mistake.
At least it was a mistake, at least for the earliness of his choice. I'm okay with him doing it, but it was way too soon. Right.
Because realistically, Hendricks had, a 3 or 4 hit shutout going in that 6th or 7th inning when he was pulled?
Well, no, because Cleveland had scored off of him in the third.
Right. That's right. But they were still nursing a 4-run lead at the time.
Coming into the fourth, it was 3-1. So they have a 2-run lead, and Lester comes in. I believe Lester comes in the fifth. So right. I guess it would have been a 4-run lead. It would have been 5-1.
After a single walk, one runner on, and then Lester proceeds to throw just a horrendous wild pitch. Hit Ross in the face mask, knocked him backwards.
Yeah.
2-run score on the wild pitch. And now we're in this situation. Lester continues to pitch, and actually he calmed down and he pitched pretty well after that.
Right. And you also got, now granted, you had the throwing error by David Ross right before that. You had a little dribbler, he throws wide. And you heard a lot of people say, "Man, why wasn't there interference? Why wasn't there running lane interference? Because the runner going to first wasn't in the running lane." Well, interference matters if the placement of the runner affects the ability of the ball to get to the first baseman. Ross was so wild, and we see Rizzo, lunging all the way to his glove side and can't even come up with it. Had nothing to do with the runner, but he throws it out of play, which then means instead of allowing, I believe it was Davis to score, it's 2 bases from the time of the pitch. So instead of runners now on probably third and a run scored, it's runners on second and third, so it's a break. So maybe you get out of it, and then comes the 2 runs on 1 pitch. Right.
Right. And then so we take this.
I'm sorry, it was Carlos Santana and Jason Kipnis that scored on the wild pitch,
right.
not Davis.
Right. So the Cubs score again. Now it's 6-3 Cubs. We think that might be because David Ross comes in and crushes one, just a no-doubter, and it's great to see it do it because we all know that this is David Ross's last game as a Cub, and as soon as John Lester comes out of that game, so is David Ross. So that's David Ross's last at-bat as a professional baseball player, and he hits a solo shot.
Because that's the oldest catcher to hit a home run in the World Series. Which,
as we both know, ended up saving the Cubs in this World Series.
It did.
So we go into the eighth inning, and it's 6-3 Cubs, and then all of a sudden, Aroldis Chapman gives up a 3-1 shot. And I don't mean this was not a no-doubt out-of-the-ballpark home run. This is something where a guy went outside of his comfort zone, put the bat on the ball, and popped it out over the left field wall.
It definitely brought back ideas of Aaron Boone in 2003 and the heartbreak that he gave the Red Sox in 2003, which, I mean, ended Grady Little's managing career in Boston because he left, and then here comes Terry Francona. You know, you had Brandon Guyer, who was brought over from the Rays, who hits an RBI double, so it makes it a two-run lead now, and then what gets me, and as a hitter, you can speak this better than me. I could never, when I played, I could never get comfortable choking up. It just felt weird. And we see Anthony Rizzo do it, and Rajai Davis choked up about an inch and a half on that bat. Now, Chris, tell me, because I can't speak to it. Just in choking up alone, I know it increases your bat speed. That's the main point of it. But how much does that increase bat placement across the zone, coming through the zone? Because to me, if he's holding it normally, now I'm thinking maybe he misses the sweet spot of that bat, and it ends up being a double off the wall that only scores one, or it ends up being a fly ball into left that gets you out of the inning. So
right.
What does it mean with him choking up and how it helped him?
So there's several reasons for a guy to choke up on his bat. And one of the reasons is that maybe he's using a bat that's a little bit too big for him. And that is a situation where you're going to pull more of that sweet spot of the bat into the strike zone by choking up on it. Now,
and Barry Bonds choked up all the time. Barry Bonds choked up every at bat. That was just his thing.
He used a big heavy bat, but the reason Barry Bonds choked up is because Barry Bonds wanted to swing the bat like he was playing softball. Now, I don't know if you ever played slow pitch softball, but when you begin your swing in slow pitch softball, you're already 3/4 of the way through it. It's because you want to get the bat head around as fast as you can to hit the ball as hard as you can to get any kind of exit speed on it. It's the same thing in fast pitch softball, but only because you need to get the bat head around in order to get it through the zone in time to hit the pitch.
Right.
This is the reason that Rajai Davis was choking up on his bat, because he knows he's going to see 99, 100, 101, 102 even from Aroldis Chapman. And he needs to get that bat around as fast as he possibly can. Now, in Rajai Davis's case, Rajai Davis isn't using a bat that's too big for him. So he is theoretically hurting himself by choking up if it comes to hitting a pitch on the outside of the plate.
Right.
Now
he's choking up just for bat speed against the heat that Chapman's throwing at this point.
Right. This is a fast pitch softball style choking up. He is choking up specifically to get the bat head through the zone faster. And we see him reach for that pitch and kind of it's a pretty fair reach. Now, you may have noticed, I don't know if you noticed or not, but I noticed that when he choked up on his bat, he also crowded the plate a little bit more. And that's probably why he was able to go out and get that pitch. Had he just continued his regular stance and choked up on the bat, he probably would have missed that pitch.
So you think it was kind of the perfect storm of decisions made by him? Because I don't think it was a bad pitch. It was lower away. It was a great spot for a pitch, and you just got, which you got to tip your cap, which sucks to have happen in Game 7, but it happens. Now, at this point we're tied, so we're going to bring in the rain delay right now because we're going to turn things around, okay? Because we have a tie, so rain delay is, but I want to go back into Kluber here for a moment. Do you think, because you and I talked, obviously during the game, the majority of the game, and you think that Tito left Kluber in too long, and I disagree.
Right.
So, tell me why. Tell me why you think.
This is what I was thinking. I realized that Kluber was pitching well. I get it. I'm not saying that Kluber pitched poorly. I'm saying that as good as he could possibly pitch in that game, he was pitching, and he was still getting hit. So in that situation where you're now facing a team who has your ace timed to the point that they can hit him when he is making excellent pitch choices, placing them where they need to be, he's hitting all of his spots, he's doing everything that he needs to do, and he still gives up 4 runs, you got to step back and say, I realize he's pitching well, but they're hitting him, and I need to go to the pen.
But on that point, do you think that they're hitting him because he doesn't have it? Or maybe, like we've said, yes, he was pounding the zone, strikeout, but that also is going to up your pitch count. So he's pitching to contact. He trusts his defense behind him. I mean, we're talking he was getting 2 outs on 4 and 5 pitches in the second and third inning. I mean, 30-something through almost 3 1/3.
I'm like I said, Kluber pitched very well that game. However, as a manager, no matter how good your pitcher's throwing, if he's still getting hit while he's throwing his best pitches, you have to step back and say, they have him. They have his number this game. I got to put somebody else in. And Francona had 3 guys, 3 of the best relievers in the game, sitting in his bullpen who had not touched the baseball in Game 6. They were all rested and ready to go. He could have gone to Miller. He could have gone one of 3 ways, and instead he let Kluber stay in long enough to give up that solo shot. And I think it was a mistake. I think he stayed in too long. I think when the third inning ended and it was 3-1, as that third inning ended, that should have been the end of his night. Because it's already 3. They've already got 3 runs on you. 3-1 is not insurmountable. Like you and I discussed at the time, I thought that 4-1 was probably going to be the end of the game. 5-1 certainly.
Right. I understand your point, and I'm not saying that you're completely wrong like normal. I think you bring a good point to it. My only thing I disagree with you on is I get that they're hitting him, but he didn't make a mistake on the Fowler pitch. Okay, up in the zone a little bit, but it was a beautiful 2-seamer that tailed to the outer third of the plate that Fowler barreled up. The biggest mistake, and I can't remember precisely what he threw when Contreras doubled, but the mistake was the pitch to Baez. He hung the pitch to Baez, and Baez smacked it. I still think he could have gotten through that inning because Baez had been – I mean, he went from NLCS MVP to trying to muscle everything out of the park and was hitting horrifically. I mean, he was swinging out of his shoes at balls way out of the zone, outside down. I mean, the one thing that these Cubs need to get better at is patience in finding the curveball because they were getting beat by breaking balls consistently. I think you could have gotten through the inning with Kluber. I still probably wouldn't have gone into the next inning with him, but still, if you can save 2 outs in 10 or 15 pitches, I don't think it would have been the worst thing. But I understand your point a little bit better now. Obviously that the game is kind of past. So
this is all I'm saying. You and I can both agree that he didn't make a mistake to Fowler, right? And Fowler went out and got that ball. Here's my problem with that. When you see a guy go after a pitch that's not a mistake and crush it, that's when you know you're in trouble. Because now your best pitcher is getting hit on his best pitches.
And that is kind of the beauty of a 7-game series is you're seeing these guys in such a small span of time that similar to Chapman is that they can time a jet, they also kind of begin to get a better feel for what Kluber wants to do. And I get that point. I understand, where you're going, and it was. I mean, I think we both were thinking, okay, this game's pretty much over. Cubbies are going to win it handily, which, it's a bummer to see it go out like that, but, at least they kind of get to go out with authority, and then Davis happens. So why was David Ross so important? David Ross, had he not ended up hitting that home run, I mean, oh my gosh, it would have absolutely the game would have been over.
They would have lost. Yeah, they would have lost. Because we go into the bottom of the ninth tied 6-6. Well, the only reason we go into the bottom of the ninth tied 6-6 is because David Ross hit that home run to make it 6-3 and not 5-3.
Exactly.
Now, you can make the argument, which I made the argument, that had Madden not gone to Lester, and the wild pitch not been thrown, it would have been 6-1, and the 2-run shot doesn't tie the game.
Yeah.
But
and one of the crazy things here, I got a stat here for you that I want you to think, and this is kind of crazy. Schwarber bats .364 in the postseason over the course of his, postseason career. Okay, they were 3-1 with Schwarber in the lineup. On the flip side, in the first 4 games of the World Series, Francisco Lindor had 7 hits. He had 1 in the final 3, including going 0 for 8 in Game 6 and 7. I mean, it just shows you how everything, I mean, everything can change. And I mean, but to me, that's just the beauty. That's just the beauty of, of what the game is. So, guys, I know that we said we were going to go ahead. But yeah, go ahead, Al.
And I just want to say real quick that every single beautiful thing about the game of baseball happened in that Game 7.
The only thing that we missed would have been a wild pitch on the intentional walk in the ninth.
Right. There was drama. There was intensity. There was back and forth. There was a rain delay. There was all of these things.
And then pure class
the rain delay was one of those things. Yeah, the rain delay was one of those things where it was like, of course there's a rain delay, because who doesn't want to be groggy and tired the next day after a Game 7, right? Why not make the Game 7 go till midnight?
Exactly.
Of course there was a rain delay. So anytime you get a game like that, which is not very often in my opinion, anytime you get a game like that that's so monumentally important for both of those teams, and then it goes 10 innings, it's the beauty of this sport that no other sport has.
Definitely. And guys, I know we said we were going to bring up some of the postseason or the off-season stuff today. Not going to be able to get to it now. We got a bunch of stuff with options being exercised, guys that are going to become free agents. Dexter Fowler has said he will become a free agent again, which he was coming into the season and re-signed with the Cubs. We'll see if Jake Arrieta comes back. Terry Francona has already had both his options picked up by Cleveland. So 2019 and 2020, he's going to be Cleveland's skipper. But since we are running tight on time and we have Adnan Virk set to jump on with us now, give us just a minute. We're going to go ahead, take a short break, and we'll be right back with Baseball Tonight host Adnan Virk here on Out of Left Field.
Hey guys, Chris here from Out of Left Field, and I want to remind you that Out of Left Field is a part of the Grueling Truth Network. Head over to the Grueling Truth for news and information on everything from boxing to football and even the CFL. Listen as Matt Andruscavage discusses the 49ers or Mike Goodpasser on Inside Boxing Weekly. Peruse Os Davis' CSL blog, and then tune into the Rouge, White, and Blue CFL podcast with Os and Joe Pritchard. All that and more on the Grueling Truth Network, online at thegruelingtruth.net, at Grueling Truth on Twitter, or the Grueling Truth Facebook page. The Grueling Truth Network, where legends speak.
Hey guys, we are back with Out of Left Field. Adnan Virk joining us now to talk about what was an absolutely crazy Game 7 in the World Series. Adnan, thank you again for jumping on short notice. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much, guys. I mean, like you said, that Game 7 was so wild. Trust me, I've been hoping somebody would want me to talk about it, so I appreciate you guys having me on.
Well, you and I had chit-chatted a little bit during, but now that everything kind of settled and we don't have that knee-jerk reaction, everyone loves to say right afterwards it's the best, one of the best games of all time. 2 days removed, I still think it goes down as one of the all-time historic games in the history of this game.
I'm with you because you said one of. I was disputing those who immediately were saying it was the greatest game ever. I said, well, hang on a second now, because what happens is also, fellas, you know this, you guys are young, but, especially with a sport like baseball, people end up looking at it through a different prism because of our ages. So, depending on what age you are, you look at games a different way. And I would always think that games when you're younger or young-ish have the biggest impact on you, which is my long way of saying Game 7 of the 1991 World Series was unbelievable. I mean, I was 13 years old. It's one of the biggest reasons that I fell in love with baseball. And I'll say this World Series Game 7 was awesome But up until then, the series wasn't great. Only 2 one-run games, some sloppy baseball, blowouts, etc. That Game 7 of 1991 World Series was the crescendo to a series in which both teams, the Twins and the Braves, went worst to first. Every game was one run. Puckett's immortal home run in Game 6 with the Jack Buck call, we'll see it tomorrow night. Like, everything about that was unreal. And then the pitching was awesome because Smoltz was great, and then Jack Morris famously the 10-inning shutout, and then the winning Gene Larkin sac fly scores Dan Gladden. To me, that's the greatest game I've ever seen, and part of that is because I was only 13, and when you're a kid, these things are magical. I would also add to it Game 7, 2001, the Yankees dynasty, which was a dynasty which I thought was so much fun to watch, and as much as people hate the Yankees, that was an easy team to root for. But that night in Arizona, the way that Schilling, and that was really the precursor to starters as relievers, when Randy Johnson came out of the pen. And the fact that I never saw Joe Torre show any emotion, and then he gave this fist pump in the 8th inning, I'll never forget. It's always seared in my memory. When Soriano hit that home run to give the Yankees the lead, you see Torre give a fist pump, and then, of course, Rivera, who was so incredible, actually gives it up in the Luis Gonzalez blooper. Those two really stand out. In recent memory, Game 6, 2011 was awesome. Nelson Cruz should have made the catch for the Rangers. They should have won the World Series. But I'll put this one top 5 because of the fact the Rajai Davis home run elevated it to high theater. I thought up until that, it was certainly a tense game, guys. And you got 108 versus 68. And that's how long these collective droughts are. Everybody who's watching the game knows that. So that's a part of it. But listen, Javi Baez, couple errors, that wild pitch scored a couple runs off Ross's helmet. Like, it was a little just kind of strange. But that Davis home run, boys, is one of the great moments I've ever seen as a baseball fan, because I was sitting there on my couch, and I'm sure you guys are the same, especially in today's world. People crack open a laptop. Maybe you're texting on your phone. You're watching, but maybe you're not watching every single pitch. When that happened, I threw my phone. I said, okay, that's enough. I don't want any more distractions. I'm not missing a single second the rest of the way. This is a 35-year-old journeyman who had not hit a home run since August, facing a closer who hadn't given up a home run since June, and he parks it in the 9th inning of Game 7 at home. Like, it was amazing to see, and that certainly elevated things. And then that rain delay, I think it added to it. I don't know about you guys. I know some people say they turn it off. I think that added to the drama. All of a sudden, you go, hang on a second, this is biblical. This is greater than us. All of a sudden, the heavens are opening because the Cubs and the Indians are actually going to win the World Series. And it was short enough.
That was the greatest part of the game for me.
Right? Because it allowed you just to catch your breath and, okay, what are we watching here? Like, this is something greater than we realize, And then obviously Zobrist, the winning hit, and the fact it was still a one-run game, the beautiful super slow-mo of Chris Bryant smiling as the Cubs win it. So I've got a top 5, boys. It was awesome to watch.
And I think, a couple of the things, as you brought up Mariano Rivera, I read a stat one time that he gave up fewer runs in the postseason than the number of men who had walked on the moon. I mean, as good as he was, and then this little blooper off Luis Gonzalez. It was just crazy. But I'm with you. I mean, it kind of made me think back to the 2008 World Series with the Phils and the Rays, where you get a rain delay that kind of goes over into the next day. Well, there is no next day.
Right.
How long are we going to be waiting? It was just, it was amazing. It had everything that you could have hoped for, and more. And I said this to a lot of some friends of mine. Said it took the best parts of what baseball is and crammed it into one amazing game. People that think baseball is too slow. I know you do college football. It's the 2-minute drive. You need to get to the last 2 minutes of the fourth quarter. Basketball, maybe the last 5. This series proved that all he needed was one run. All it had to be was one run. One pitch could change everything.
Yeah, I said to a guy.
That is perfectly said. You're right. You didn't get a chance to kind of go, okay, this one's over. Like, even, right, you get Game 5 because it was a big 7-0 lead. The Cubs had, okay, it was in the bag. But you always had that sense that the tide could turn. And you're right. Part of that was the micromanaging of the managers. And I think both those guys are great. There's no doubt Joe Madden and Terry Francona are two of the best managers in baseball. But especially Tito. The fact, listen, I cannot stop thinking about this. Michael Brantley is one of their best players. If they had Brantley in that lineup, if Carrasco was healthy, if Salazar was healthy enough to be a starter rather than a reliever, I think the Indians win that World Series. Now, I get that there's no excuses. It can't just be, well, if we had a full deck. I totally recognize that. But my point is, for Tito to be able to extract that team to Game 7 was unreal. And for Madden, you mentioned that this is everything you'd want in a baseball game. You also had what could have been a terrible villain and a guy who was beloved as a baseball lifer. When Joe took Hendricks out after 63 pitches, Joe Buck and Smoltz were all over it like, wow, this feels awfully premature. to go to the well with John Lester, who hates having runners on, and there's a runner on first, and he's only given up one run. Like, what are you doing, Joe? Like, I felt for Joe Madden because I like him. I know him a little bit as a guy. He's a phenomenal guy. He's wonderful to talk to. I said, oh, my God, Joe, you're going to join the Billy Goat and Bartman and the Black Cat because they're going to go, how can you pick him out for Lester? And then Chapman, I mean, I tweeted at one point, guys, I said, Joe Madden will not be satisfied until Aroldis Chapman's arm falls off. Like, I'm like, he was just extracting so much. You've got to trust other guys. And thankfully, you saw at the end he had to get Edwards and Montgomery in there because you can't just rely on one guy too much.
Then they give up Dan Vogelbach, who is, supposed to be a star first baseman, who they won't need because they have Rizzo for Mike Montgomery. So I was surprised at the small amount of usage that he got as we got deeper into that series. I'm curious about something. This is something that I had thought about, and I want to get your take on it. I don't know if you've been asked this or thought about this. With David Ross retiring and John Lester freshly signed this past season, what do you think about the Cubs bringing him on as an advisor, even if just in spring training, to try and help Contreras mainly and Montero get comfortable working with him, since he knows so well what Lester likes, what it takes to catch him and keep him focused in those games, to bring him on as continual that fatherhead figure that all those guys kind of gravitated to, as we saw with Rizzo and other guys in the tail end of the series?
Well, I know Rossi a little bit because he worked with us on Baseball Tonight a couple of years ago. So he's a good dude. He's exactly what you expect. He's laid back, no ego, funny, self-deprecating. So I haven't actually even talked to my boss about it yet, but I assume if he wants to do ATV, you'll see him next year on ESPN on Baseball Tonight. But the party line has been he wants to spend some time with his family, and that's why he's stepping away from the game. And by the way, 39 years old, hitting a home run in his final game was unbelievable. But I don't think that he's going to do that. I think special advisor in spring training, sure, that's fine. He can come by and offer a few words. But whatever wisdom he's passed on, he's done it all year. I think, and that was so funny to see that conversation between him and Rizzo, where Rizzo's telling him, man, I'm in a glass case of emotion right now, quoting Anchorman, and of course he went right over Ron Stanley. Yeah, it's going to get worse, buddy. Wait till we get this 3-run lead in the ninth inning. It's going to get worse. So I think all year he's been working with Contreras and Montero. I think all year he's told them this is the way Lester is. And I think there is a learning curve. Like, Lester, as great a pitcher as he is, he's a little finicky. Typical lefty, they get a little strange. Like, the fact he's always seems like he's challenging the umpire and questioning calls, and like he's definitely flammable. As great a pitcher as he is, you always kind of feel like he's a little bit toxic. So I agree with you. If I'm a Cubs fan, I'm going to feel a little bit apprehensive without David Ross there, but I don't see him coming on and being a special advisor. He'll show up at spring training if Theo or Joe Madden asked him to, but after that he's going to spend some time with his family and hopefully some time with us at ESPN.
For sure. And you get that same fire from Lackey, too.
Yeah,
I think that
you're right. He's a bit of a firecracker as well, obviously.
I think the one moment from this World Series that's really going to be burned into my memory, and you were talking about how you have to take a step back and you have to put this World Series Game 7 in context of other great World Series games. And of course, I'm a baseball history guy, so I got to put it in the context of Sandy Koufax's Game 5 perfect game, and those kind of older, really great World Series moments. But I think one of the greatest things. Everybody always mentions Game 6 of the 1975 World Series. You're right. Red Sox Reds. You talk to someone like a Timmy Kirkchin or Buster, they'll always tell you that's the greatest game ever played. So you're right. There's definitely games before that all the three of us were born. But go ahead. Right. I think the moment of this World Series that's going to be burned into my brain is that moment with Rizzo standing on third base and he loses it, and he's got his hands on his helmet. And he's like, he's saying, "Oh my God, we just won the World Series." And that's the look that he had on his face. His mouth is open. That kind of like childish enjoyment of and love for the game is, I think, what people needed to see. And I'm going to say this: I think that Major League Baseball earned itself a couple of million new devoted fans with that single game. Yeah, that's been the further question. You're right. I hesitate on this one. My issue is this. If next year it's the Marlins and the Rays in the World Series, then this doesn't help baseball, obviously. They've got to continue this momentum of having a great team, though. The best thing for baseball would be not just the Cubs won, but now they built a dynasty, and the Cubs will always be in the World Series, and you have these big market teams that are great again. I will agree with you. You definitely had casual fans watching who would not normally. I swear to God, you can check my timeline. Somebody threw out Rich Sandomir, who's the former media critic of the New York Times, predicted numbers for Game 7, and I said 40 million.
And he goes, that seems a little high. And I said, well, I remember Game 701 got $39 million, and I think Cubs 108 years, people are going to go, yeah, you know what, I want to watch this. And he was like, yeah, it's a different time. The ratings are different 15 years ago, which I recognize. That was post 9/11. Again, there was a reason people were swept up in the Yankees hysteria. But I just felt like this was a game people are going to watch. And as you said, the numbers bore out that people were really excited. So my only fear is that if it's a lousy World Series, people won't be on board. But to your point, definitely in Chicago, there have been people who have been Bulls fans, going up the Jordan era. They have been fans of the Bears who haven't seen a winner since '85. There's definitely going to be people in Illinois and the Midwest who are not going to go, yep, Cubs are my team. If you're 15, 16 years old, you're never going to forget this moment. And those memories are formed when you're a teenager. You guys know that. Between 10 and 20, if your team wins, you go, that's it, I'm locked in. So I will agree with your number about $1 million or $2 million. That I agree with you on that. That definitely, you've got more baseball fans now for sport, which unfortunately skews older and skews more towards Caucasians. So hopefully we'll get some other people in there as well.
Yeah, and to me, I think at the end of it really wrapped up what the World Series is, was the amount of class that came through both sides, obviously. But and I know you know Tito well because he worked with you guys for a year in between his time in Boston and his time now in Cleveland. But for him to sit, he talked with Tom Verducci after he had his post-game presser. But of all things, to mention the World Series crew chief and John Hirschbeck and his sons who had passed away over time. And obviously John also had the plate in the game after Jose Fernandez's passing. To me, it just epitomizes what the beauty of the game is there's class when you win and when you lose. And for the game to come down to the way that it did it was beautiful. So, Adnan, we want to let you run. We appreciate you coming on with us. Real quick before we let you go, I know you had J.K. Simmons, Oscar winner, on the Cinephile podcast, which y'all can find on the ESPN app. But anything coming out for our guys to take a listen to, check out what's new with the Cinephile podcast?
Absolutely. We've got a guy named Matt Atchity who runs the very popular website, RottenTomatoes.com. He's coming up on Tuesday. I'll also be reviewing Mel Gibson's new film, bit of a comeback for him here, this war film that he has made now, Hacksaw Ridge. As well as a really good documentary called De Palma. And in a couple weeks from then, so this will be next Tuesday, so next week, as you mentioned, the ESPN app and iTunes, we're going to have not only Miles Teller, he's got a new boxing film out called Bleep for This, but also Billy Bob Thornton, one of my favorites. He's got Bad Santa 2 coming out Thanksgiving, so he's actually going to be in studio on ESPN, so I cannot wait to talk Bad Santa with Billy Bob. That'll be coming out in a couple weeks.
Are we going to see Bad Santa with an Oscar nod?
I wish, man. I'm going to tell him about that. The fact that too often, and you guys know I love the Oscar bait, and I love these heavy dramas, but I also love a good comedy. I think it's unfair that Hollywood always ignores those comedies. In an alternative universe, you're right. Billy Bob Thornton should have, I'm glad he won an Oscar for Sling Blade, but he should have got nominated for Bad Santa. That's one of the great performances I've ever seen by him.
Well, Adnan, we appreciate you jumping on. Guys, please check out the ESPN app for Cinephile podcast. Also, Adnan was on the Dan Le Batard show today. It's November 4th, so check that out. Talk a little bit about some Canadian questions, which I believe you found out about the Canadian Loch Ness Monster, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, that was wild. I mean, those guys are funny as hell. I listen all the time. So when Mike Golick Jr. texted me, said, "Hey, I'm filling in for Le Batard. Do you want to do this?" I'm like, "Oh my God, are you kidding? I'm ready to go." So hopefully I can get on with Stu Gatz and those guys more often. He's such a knucklehead. He's great.
Yeah. Well, definitely made my morning, guys. Check it out. Also, keep looking on College Football Live. We're adding it on there as well. And also Baseball Tonight throughout the offseason as we roll into next year. Been another episode, our last regular season and postseason episode of Out of Left Field. We'll be getting to offseason stuff coming up next week, and hopefully we'll have Stacey Piagno on as well, one of the female players for the Sonoma Stompers. We will see you guys back next week on Out of Left Field.